Hello and welcome to a Casual Cinemedia bonus episode. My name's Mike.
And my name's Justin. Chris is not with us right now. Not forever.
Yeah, just for
I almost said no longer with us, but not as a joke, but then I realized that's way too morbid.
Yeah, he will be back. He's
He
just
will.
having some technical difficulties. So we wish him the best of luck and we will see him soon.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be back for our next episode, but the following week's episodes he will be back for sure.
He'll be back before the Isle of Dogs review.
Yes.
So today's episode, we will be going over a feature review for Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One. And that's it.
That's it. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
And if you want to follow along with what we're watching next, let us know what you think about Ready Player One or any of the films we've talked about before. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinemedia. You can join our Facebook group and talk film with us at facebook.com/groups/Casual Cinemedia, or you can email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
We will be announcing a winner for our iTunes review contest from March on the next episode. Or we did ask anyone who wants to leave us a 5-star review, send it in a copy of that review, like a screenshot, and we would enter you into a drawing to win a chance to pick a movie for us to review. So stay tuned next week and we will announce who the winner is.
Yes, and stay tuned for future contests because I'm sure we'll do it again.
Yeah.
And before we jump into the movie, we wanted to remind everyone about Real Outreach. It is a nonprofit organization that we are working with that is sending less fortunate kids to the movie theaters to see a movie and get the experience of, going to the theater and getting popcorn and seeing a movie, which is something, they can't afford to do, don't have the opportunity to do. And I think it's a really great cause.
It's an experience that little kids love. Why not donate a little bit of money if you can afford it and give some less fortunate kid a chance to have some really fun memories?
Yeah, let them escape for a little while. And, they probably need to do that more than many other people. They would appreciate that, I think.
Yeah. So if you're feeling selfless, it's a great cause. Again, that is realoutreach.com.
Yep. REEL Outreach, like a film reel.
Clever.
It lets you know that it is about film and also that they are not fake. Win-win.
Yeah. What else could you ask for in the name of a charity?
Exactly. All right. So you ready to move into Ready Player One?
Yes. Ready.
Player One.
My name's Wade Watts. My dad picked that name because it sounded like a superhero's alter ego, like Peter Parker or Bruce Banner. But he died when I was a kid, my mom too. And I ended up here, sitting here in my tiny corner of nowhere. There's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the oasis.
All right, Justin. So before we get into our proper review of Ready Player One, I thought this would be a good time to bring up one of our oldest listeners' requests. So we have a listener named Jerry Hart who once asked us what our favorite Steven Spielberg movie is. And although this is just a bonus episode, I figured this would be as good a time as any to answer that question. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. It's unfortunate that Chris can't be here to do that. Maybe we'll get his out of him another time, but yeah, for now, let's do it.
Okay. So I would say probably my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. I'm going to do two because they're so similar.
Sure.
And that is Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. And the reason I do two is because I know that Raiders of the Lost Ark is the better movie, but The Last Crusade is the one I used to watch all the time when I was a kid. I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. So I'm going to go with both. Since they're both Indiana Jones, I don't feel bad about tying them.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's okay.
But man, Last Crusade is so funny. Sean Connery and Harrison Ford have the best chemistry. Yeah, it's fantastic. So that's probably my favorite Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah.
Where are you coming from?
I'm going to go with War of the Worlds.
Oh.
That's not true. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I just wanted to see your reaction.
Yeah. It was of shock and awe. It
was. I like it. I like the noise that you made. It was everything I hoped your reaction would be in a noise.
Genuine surprise.
Yeah. So no, it is not War of the Worlds. It's actually Jurassic Park. Which
What? Jurassic what?
Park?
Sounds stupid.
Yeah. It is about a theme park where they have recreated dinosaurs from the Jurassic era mainly. So I guess if that concept sounds stupid to you, then yeah, you probably won't like it.
No, actually, it sounds awesome. It's a great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah.
Surprise, everyone. I was joking.
Yeah, it's really good. I distinctly remember watching it at both like the cinema and the drive-in when it was out originally. And, it just has this nostalgia attached to it as on top of just being a really, really great movie. Jeff Goldblum is basically like one of his most iconic performances that everyone loves him based on.
Dr. Ian Malcolm.
And I did get the chance to go see it in a theater when I was visiting Chicago one summer for like a week, and it was playing in like a really old theater there, and everyone was kind of quoting along with it. It was kind of like a midnight screening sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And that was super fun to like go back and like have all that nostalgia come back. So like the combination of nostalgia and just being a really great movie, that's why it's my favorite. It's so much fun and like so quotable. And just well shot. I guess it's also like a milestone in terms of CG, although some of the CG doesn't quite look great by today's standards.
But it still looks better than a lot of CG you see in today's movies too, in certain scenes. Yeah.
I guess by today's like top tier CG standards, it's not as good. But yeah, it still looks better than some things like I don't know why, but the first movie with really bad CG that comes to mind is like The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro.
Why that movie?
I don't know. I remember walking out of that movie distinctly thinking like,
this is no Jurassic Park.
That CG was not good and very ugly. I didn't think it was no Jurassic Park specifically.
That's funny.
But I remember thinking that the CG was specifically bad and terrible.
The Wolfman. 2011's The Wolfman.
Yeah. That classic.
Okay. All right. Yeah, well, that's true. The CG in that movie, I don't remember being very good either.
But anyways, yeah. So let's talk about Ready Player One. And before we go into it, we are going to do a non-spoiler section, and we'll give you a spoiler alert warning before we actually start talking specifics and spoilers.
Indeed.
All right. So non-spoilers, what did you think about the movie? Or if you want to talk about your expectations.
I knew very little about the book, other than the excerpts people would like post on Reddit or something when trying to show an example of how it's written. It didn't look like it was going to be for me based on what I saw. It looked really heavy on the references and pop culture stuff, like relentlessly so. So I wasn't super looking forward to this movie at all. And also, post 2005, Spielberg has not really set my world ablaze with his filmography. I wouldn't say that I've disliked many of them, but none of them have really stood out to me. I really did not like Tintin at all, which was like his motion capture movie from a few years back.
Yeah.
So I really hated it, actually. So that mixed with all the hate on the internet going around for this movie before it came out had me really expecting like not to dig this movie at all. So that's kind of where I was coming from going into this movie. What about you?
Yeah, I'd heard of the book, but I had no idea what it was about. And I can't remember what movie it was that I saw, but there was a teaser trailer for Ready Player One that kind of teased the concept. And it actually got me really excited. So I ran out, like I think on my lunch break the next day, and ran by Half Price Books and bought a copy of the book and read it within like a week and a half because I'm kind of slow at reading. It's not that long of a book.
Yeah. Did you like the book?
I did. I actually really liked the book. There's some of the things that you like pointed out that were like people's examples of I guess bad writing or writing where it was just like throwing as many references as you can.
Right. Let me caveat that by saying like I only know like a paragraph or like 3 paragraphs of like a little excerpt from the book.
Yeah.
That was being passed around, that I'm sure a lot of people who didn't read the book and made up their mind before they saw it saw also.
Yeah, I saw that excerpt too, or the main one that was going around, which is definitely the worst example of that is in the book of that stuff. But yeah, there are other examples, but it's definitely the least good part of the book, and everything else about it I enjoyed, and I thought it was, a really entertaining, fun read. Right?
Interesting. So interested to hear what your thoughts are going to be, because from what I understand, a lot of people who are fans of the book are really not liking the movie at all.
Yeah,
so
I'll be
interested. Yeah, I'll be interested to see where you land on that.
Well, as far as my expectations for the movie, I thought that unless they change a lot of the stuff that's in the book, it could be a really bad movie and really uninteresting, right? Like, because there are certain things that happen in the book, which I'm sure we'll get into, that like, there's no way that translates to screen in an exciting, interesting way, right? Like it only works in a book. And I don't know. And so I was also a little worried that they would up like the nostalgia and the references, like the pop culture references from book to movie, you know, to give that more of to lean on what makes the book popular more than the book does.
Right. Yeah.
So I was a little worried about that. So I was kind of skeptical about whether or not it would be good, even though the trailers got me hyped every time I watched it.
Okay. So overall thoughts, I guess I'll go first. So let me start, and I guess I will say the references were really hit or miss for me, but with more hits than expected, if that makes sense. So
yeah, like hit or miss in the sense that you didn't get them, or just that like the coolness of the references didn't land for you?
The coolness.
Gotcha.
I'm sure there were several that I didn't get, but you know, you don't know what you don't know. So, but the references, they aren't made in, there's a couple of them that are pretty clumsy, but like they're not the way I thought they were going to be based on what the property was. Like there's a Terminator 2 reference that makes me laugh and a few more that we'll get into. The characters felt a little blah, or at least Ty Sheridan did. I enjoyed some good character moments, and I enjoyed a lot of the stuff in the Oasis more than I thought I would. I'd say overall, it's an often fun experience where if you're in touch with like your inner little kid, or if you have kids, you can probably have a great time with this movie. But I can totally understand how this might not seem very good, or it might seem kind of unbearable for some people. But I would say it's a fun family movie. It's a fun family time, and it's got good pacing. I didn't love it, but it's completely fine.
I probably feel about the same as you, I think, in terms of enjoyment of the movie. Mm-hmm. Like if we were going to rate it on 1 to 10, I feel like we'd come down about the same. I think that Ty Sheridan leaves something to be desired in his performance.
Boring.
Like, yeah. I think it's pretty uninteresting.
He's like a less interesting Miles Teller.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's that much different from the book in terms of character. You could give a performance that is interesting, and with like the amount of interesting that his character is, which isn't very much in the book. Like the book is more about the puzzles and trying to figure out the keys and like what he needs to do to get the keys, right? And so like the character's not that well developed, but I think the performance could be more interesting. So I was a little more interested in like the Oasis, which I didn't think I was going to be actually. I thought
me neither.
Spending a lot of time in a CG world with CG characters,
mm-hmm.
you know, combined with real live action characters, I thought that would be kind of clunky and weird.
Oh man, me too.
But I did like a lot of like the CG stuff that was going on, or the time like where they're in the Oasis.
Me too. I thought it was going to be unbearable because of like the motion capture, like the sweeping camera and everything's so busy. Like that's how I felt Tintin was. Like when I was watching Tintin, I didn't know what I was supposed to focus on in the frame. You know what I mean? Like I felt like it was just too much going on, too busy. The camera was moving too much. And based on the trailers of Ready Player One, I thought that's what this was going to be. Like I was like, oh god, it's going to be more of that crap where it's like it's like a cartoon that's too busy for me to focus on. I didn't have that problem in this movie like I thought I would. Did you?
No, not at all. Everything made sense. I guess it does get maybe a little chaotic in some of like the race sequence at the beginning.
Sure.
But that's probably the only point where I think I felt that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But like it's never so much that you're uninterested. It's only so much that like you get the impression that if you do get the inkling to watch it again, you're going to notice a lot more.
Definitely. I think just like in the book, I think the reference dropping is the worst thing about this movie. Oh god. Oh man. Well, there's
it is and it isn't. Like there's parts where I think it's really organic and fine.
Yeah.
But when it comes up in dialogue, like whenever it's like the girl and the guy bonding over one another, like Parsifal and
Artemis,
yes. there's scenes where like they're literally having conversations with each other, and in place of actual chemistry, they're like, you like this thing? I like this thing. You know, and it's like, oh God, this is painful.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that bothers me. Like, I don't mind it so much when the Iron Giant pops up, or like whenever, you know, a Ninja Turtle pops up or something.
Yeah.
That kind of reference doesn't bother me because it's just in the background and you can see it or not see it. Or like,
well, when the Iron Giant pops up, they're like, she's like, oh man, is that an Iron Giant?
Yeah,
And,
that one's a little obvious.
So like
but...
that, it's like when they call him out in dialogue that like it's kind of like, or annoying, but like even that one, I guess you see, and it's kind of okay, and because she's responding to it, and that one makes a little sense. But sometimes they're just straight up talking about references that we don't see. There's
a GoldenEye reference, like a Nintendo 64 GoldenEye reference I didn't like. There's also a there's a reference to Buckaroo Banzai, which is just like cringeworthy.
Yeah.
There's some dialogue that sucks here and there, but overall the references didn't bother me nearly as much as I thought they would based on the whole idea of this property.
Yeah, I think it's just like the most cringeworthy things that happen in the movie to me, where you're just like, oh, this is bad. I think all come from like references. Like there are some other things that aren't great about it, but to me, those are the points where I've found myself like, ugh, like kind of, you know,
and then, but then there are some references that I found to me were so much fun, and we'll talk more about specifics and spoilers. There's there's one from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They make a reference to the Holy Hand Grenade.
Yeah.
I thought that one was done pretty well because they never once mentioned what the Holy Hand Grenade is from.
Right.
So I think that works, right? Because then you actually have to be smart enough to know what the Holy Hand Grenade is. And if you don't, you literally don't worry about it because you're like, oh, well, it's a hand grenade. So.
Yeah, exactly. Those are where like references work the best, I think. And they do a lot of those where like there's just characters and like things that are going on that you kind of have to have seen the movie or know what it's from, you know, to get it. And yeah, that's where it's really working for me. I think another interesting thing, if you haven't seen the movie yet, is you get to see Simon Pegg doing an American accent, which was super weird to me for most of the movie.
It was weird.
I never got used to it. Like even by the end of the film.
I thought it was the guy from Dunkirk for a minute. It took me a minute to realize it was Simon Pegg.
Yeah.
I thought it was the other pilot who wasn't Tom Hardy from Dunkirk.
Right, yeah.
I forget that actor's name, but it looks like that guy a little bit because I was like, man, Simon Pegg doesn't have long hair with like this kind of voice.
Yeah. But I don't think I've seen him do American accent, but it was interesting, and I think it's something it took me a while to like come to terms with, even though it still never felt right to me. But yeah, that's kind of nitpicky. I think I do, like you said, I think it's really fun. There's a lot of like action sequences that are fun. I kind of like talked about the race sequence being a little too chaotic looking, but I thought the race sequence, like the opening race sequence, was really fun. And there's a lot more like that.
Yeah, it moves is the thing. It's like it's one of those movies that like this will not hold up to scrutiny at all. Like if you try to pick it apart and pick apart everything that's wrong with it, a lot of it's pretty indefensible. But if you're there to have a good time, you know, it's fine. It's perfectly fine, I think.
Yeah, anything that's bad isn't there for very long. It moves on to something else that you know, can be either bad or good. But
exactly. And one thing that I think is one of Spielberg's strengths, the geography of where you are in the scene.
Right.
Like there's some scenes where like it cuts back and forth between the real world and the oasis, and characters are standing in certain places and they're supposed to be looking at certain things, and all of that is handled really well because you're never confused. Like there's points in the movie where characters are in the oasis, but the character is looking at something in the real world, and you could see them like turn their head in the oasis and look at something because that's what they're really doing in the real world too, you know, and stuff like that. I really enjoyed those aspects of it. I do think one thing that took me out of it quite a bit was I don't understand how this oasis world works, and I wish that would have been explored a little more. Like you have some people that have like an omnidirectional pad to run on in suits where they can feel stuff that's going on in the oasis. So like they can run and jump and feel and punch and do everything like the way they should be able to. And then you also have some kids that just have like a headset on running down a sidewalk. And then you have some people sitting in a chair. I wish it would have addressed like, oh, I have like a different kind of controller where like I can control how I'm moving with my hands on like on a game stick or something. Because like, what's to stop these kids from running out into traffic?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of stuff that like I wish had been explored a little more. But also, who cares?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I thought about it towards the beginning when he's explaining the Oasis, and I think it's actually his uncle or like step uncle. We see him like he's fighting someone in his living room, but he's actually moving around like the same amount that his character is. So you think like if he's fighting on a world and like running, miles and going through, or, if he's acting in this world in more than 20 feet, he would like run into his wall and like it would limit his movement. So I agree. You don't quite understand what they're doing.
Maybe it's not as immersive as like VR. Maybe like there's like a little section where you can actually kind of see what's going on in the real world, like a little picture in a picture.
Yeah.
So you're like, you don't punch your wife or your kid or like, or like punch a hole in the wall.
Right. But it seems like it would also limit how much you can move in the Oasis if you were limited by like the
That's what I'm saying.
Like,
I wish they would have had like, oh, this is like the poor person setup where like they have like a game controller and a headset. So like they don't get the whole immersive experience.
Yeah.
They're working with like a lesser experience.
Yeah. I don't think they go into that. I don't remember if they go into the book that detailed or if it's kind of glossed over and doesn't matter too much. But yeah, the big, like, I guess like high level standard top tier thing is like that multi-directional treadmill. Yeah. Which makes sense, but yeah, you're right. Not every character has that. But yeah, it is probably nitpicky though.
Yeah, it's the logistics of it. Just like I find myself distracted by that at various points in the movie.
And I think for those who have read the book but haven't seen the movie yet, and you're wondering whether or not you'll like it or it's worth it, I would just say it's very, very different from the book, almost completely. Other than like the main concepts and characters are all there, but what they're doing and what's actually going on are completely different. If you're the kind of person that hates that and can't stand that, like really avoid this movie because you're not going to get what you want at all. And if you don't care, see it.
There you go.
Well, are you ready to move into spoilers?
I am.
All right. So spoiler alert. We will be spoiling things from here on out.
So my favorite moments in this movie, and I think the plot thread that seemed to work for me dramatically the most, would be the moments between Morrow and Halliday, which are the two creators, like the Jobs and Wozniak types, played by Simon Pegg and Mark Rylance. Yeah, Mark Rylance, is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
I felt like more of that would have been nice, and would have probably made the movie a little better, because I feel like that was the only thing in the movie that worked for me on an emotional level, where those two, and not even specifically all of that section, like the whole section between Halliday and like the girl that he didn't ask out did nothing for me. But the little story fragment of the idea of like two friends who created this thing together and had a falling out, and the one friend that's left alive is kind of haunted by this. I think that's actually a very bittersweet, touching story. And I wish that had been explored more in the script.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is the most like character development you get, surprisingly, is from like a character who's dead in the beginning of the movie and like his leftover friend, like through their past, you get all of that stuff. And I think that's the best. I actually like the whole thing of like the girl that he didn't kiss when they went on a date, and only went on one date. I mean, I like how that ties back in later, because if I remember correctly, they like set you up to think that the whole thing that he missed out on was being with her, but really it's that,
right.
He split apart from his friend Simon Pegg. Ogden Morrow is the character's name. And so I like that kind of like red herring aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way that it all comes together was impactful to me. And I think I would agree that it's the most emotionally satisfying thing in the movie.
Yeah, it's like the through line that I connected with the most, I think. Other than that, I think my other favorite part of this movie, which would be Ben Mendelsohn.
Is that's like the kind of the main bad guy, Sorrento.
Yeah, the main villain. For some reason, that guy gets me. I think he's great in everything.
Yeah, he really works in it. And I was worried that he wouldn't be very good or he'd be bad. I'm not sure what else I've seen him in. I know that I've seen him in stuff.
Rogue One.
Okay,
He's
Rogue
in
One. Yeah.
One. He was in a Netflix series called Bloodline. He's in Vertical Limit.
Okay, well there we go. I'm sure he's great in that because everything about that movie's great enough. But
yeah.
he's really good in it. I thought. I think he does like a great bad guy and like carrying the weight of the bad guy.
Yeah.
And
he's also King George VI in The Darkest Hour.
That's right.
Yeah, he's blowing up. He appears to be the go-to bad guy in Hollywood now, which I hope he doesn't get too stuck into because I think he's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd like to see him do something else, but he does work as the villain.
Yeah, he does.
Absolutely.
He's got a good face for it.
Yeah. Something I wanted to talk about that I guess I wanted to know your opinion of, and this is one of those things that comes from like, I read the book and I'm really going to try not to do any of that, or as little of that as possible, I guess. But this is the one time I think I will do it, but more for like a comparison, is that in the book, we are spending all of this time with the character of Artemis, or Parzival is, like in the Oasis. And that is the only way that we know her throughout the entire book, as Artemis, as her avatar in the Oasis. We only meet her in the last few pages of the book, right? Mm-hmm. The whole time, all of the fighting and everything is going on in the Oasis. And in the movie, they introduce her about halfway through.
Right.
He actually meets her in real life. And I don't know that it's because of the way that it's done in the book works so well, because you spend this whole story and everything that's going on. They learn to trust each other. They learn more about each other. They go through this experience together as avatars, and they still don't know what each other look like. And they still don't know if Artemis is not actually a girl. It could still be, some like guy that lives like in his mom's basement, right? That's like a point they make in the movie and the book. So like having that kind of thread go throughout the entire book to me worked a lot better than like meeting her halfway through.
Right.
But what did you think about that? Did that feel rushed to you?
No, it didn't feel rushed. It felt a little eye-rolly, I guess. Like, I think it would have been a mistake to drag it out the whole movie, because as soon as they say that and have that conversation, I think everyone in that theater or anyone watching the movie is like, oh, well, she's clearly a pretty girl. So to tease that out to the end of the movie would have been lame, because we all know what's coming. Like, it'd be different if like the voice was distorted a little bit, like his friend. Like his friend has an avatar where like the voice sounds like totally different, so you can't tell if it's a man or a woman. Whereas like her, it's not that issue. So it's not a man, and she's not going to be ugly because it's a movie. I feel like making us wait 2 hours to see like, oh, it's Olivia Cook with like a slightly distracting birthmark, like, I don't know. That would have been not good. Like if it had turned out to be a genuine surprise, that'd have been different. Like if he'd have been catfished or whatever, like, and she'd have been like a 70-year-old woman or something like that, would have been interesting. And then save that to the end. But if it's the thing that we all hope it is, but suspect that it might not be, then I don't think it's satisfying to save it to the end.
And maybe what feels rushed too is that their whole like love story only covers like half of the movie before they meet each other, and they're already like in love, basically. Oh
yeah, that felt a little rushed, but also who cares? I don't like it. Didn't bother me too much. Like, we knew the main characters have to fall in love, so don't make me sit through too much time.
That's true, but I think you can know that in a movie and still have it be satisfying and good.
No, absolutely. But I think it's like, because their relationship didn't work, like that's the part of the movie that works the least for me. Yeah. Because their entire relationship is built on like, what references do we both know? That it seemed a little uninteresting, I guess. So like, I appreciated that it was kind of sped up a little bit. Like, does that make sense? Like, I know that's not a very like high praise, right? Which is like, I'm not into that aspect, so I'm happy they didn't make me sit through it too long.
Right.
It's not like a praise for the movie, but it's also one of those staples that's in so many like big movies like this, that it just kind of comes with the territory. So I kind of don't see it.
And I think what works better in the book is that they do take the time to like make their relationship more believable. And I think even in the book, like, I don't think it ends in like a I'm in love with you sort of thing.
I wish they left the love aspect out and just had them just be into each other.
Yeah. And I think it felt like, I don't know, it felt a lot weaker than it could have been. And
oh, certainly.
Yeah, and maybe that just goes like to you said, like the whole relationship is undeveloped. I do think that like in the movie it doesn't work at all, and I think you just are better left ignoring it and enjoying everything else about the movie.
But then again, it's not terrible either. I mean, both of those actors are fine. I think Ty Sheridan's just not interesting enough to make such lackluster material be elevated above what it is, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's charismatic enough to carry it. I think a lot of that stuff could have worked with maybe a more charismatic lead, but maybe not, you know? Maybe it's just a completely, like, script issue. Like, maybe it's like a completely unfixable script issue, you know?
And maybe they just feel like they didn't want us to question whether or not it was actually a girl on the other side the whole time. Like maybe that's too distracting to what's going on. Like maybe it works in the context of a book because you have more time. Right.
And it's a plot thread that you can kind of touch back on every few pages and keep that in the back of your mind. But in a movie, you don't want to have like three plot heads. You don't want to have three plot threads hanging until the end.
Yeah.
Like
maybe
that.
Not.
Like, is she actually a girl? Like, and then also, you know, is he going to Willy Wonka this thing and win the Oasis, or, you know, so on and so forth. So that mixed with like the subplot of the two founders. I don't know. It seems like none of the subplots got enough time to really shine.
And that's something that I felt too. And I guess that's one thing I was wondering of like, does that come from having read the book? Because that's the thing I hear from like Harry Potter fans a lot who like love the books and don't like the movies.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's something that I never necessarily saw in the Harry Potter movies. Like
what exactly?
That the characters weren't developed enough, or like everything was like done too quickly and underdone in the movies. Like that you don't get a sense of the characters like you do in the book.
That's true of any adaptation. Like look at Game of Thrones. Like, you know, they do roughly, or back whenever they had books to adapt, they did roughly a book a season, and they still didn't. You know, they had 10 hours to get a book
right
on screen, and they still struggled to make satisfying adaptation choices for certain characters. So, you know, when you're coming to like the inner thoughts of a character, those are something that are always not going to be as satisfying on a screen adaptation, you know, just always.
Yeah. I guess I'm just glad to hear that you feel that way, having not read the book, that the characters were underdeveloped.
Definitely.
And it's not just I've read the book and now I'm seeing the movie thing.
No, I think they're all certainly underdeveloped, but you know, it's a kid's movie. So what are you going to do? So
I did want to talk about the puzzles, like that he has to actually figure out, like one of them being like the race that he has to run, where he figures out that he's got to actually start out driving backwards.
Right.
The whole like castle thing and like having to play the game at the end, but realizing you're not supposed to win the game and everybody's trying to win the game. Like, how did those puzzles feel to you? Like, we reviewed like Tomb Raider and we talked about those puzzles and how they're figuring them out and how it doesn't work in Tomb Raider. How did you feel about the puzzles in this one? Because I thought that they worked better than they did in Tomb Raider.
Yeah, they work better than Tomb Raider for sure, because it shows you the process of how they're figuring them out. But I would have liked more, even still. Like, this is something that I felt was still really lacking. Like, more than their main relationship, this was my other big problem with the movie, which was, like, I felt like the secrets weren't hard enough to find to where, like, I didn't believe they weren't found already. You know, like, Reddit cracked Westworld Season 1 before Episode 2 finished airing on TV live, you know? And they cracked the whole, like, twist, the entire season almost. So it's like, I don't believe that everyone trying to win this thing wouldn't have won it already a million times over, especially if all the answers and clues are in this one area where everyone knows where the answers and clues are. If they hadn't been like, this is where you go to like brush up on your trivia because everyone knows the answers have to be in here because this is all about him, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, if they hadn't said that, I would have believed it a little bit more. But because apparently that is common knowledge, that I just, you know, there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, especially with like what appears to be like a multi-billion-dollar industry that is set up specifically to solve the puzzles.
Yeah, exactly.
And get the keys. Yeah, that it felt a little weak to me. And I think it's because they have to get through them quickly to get to like the action sequences and not make them too complex for a movie. I don't know. I thought those were a little weak. I agree. I would have liked more out of them and a little bit more out of like the challenges, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted like a more complicated Easter egg hunt.
One of the things that is actually just really funny, and I wanted to see them actually do this, like take this actually straight from the book, but like in the book, one of the challenges is you get inserted into the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not Ferris Bueller's Day Off. War Games, also with Matthew Broderick. And you get inserted into the main character, and you have to reenact line for line with like the same intonation the entire movie, which they skip over pretty quickly in the book. But like, that was one of those things where I was like, when I was watching when I knew it was coming out and I was reading the book, I was like, how are they going to do this? Yeah. Like, how can we make that
that would have been
interesting?
Rad.
It would have been, and I don't know how you would pull it off in a movie, but like that sort of challenge is like really difficult, I think.
Yeah.
And really hard.
Absolutely. That would have been a good challenge to do. What did you think about whenever they went to the Overlook Hotel from The Shining? Did you enjoy that, or were you like, oh God?
That was great.
Yeah. I thought
that's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah. I thought that was really fun. Like once the camera goes into it and you actually realize like, oh my God, they're moving around in the, like over like the staircase, you know? And it's like looking at the whole lobby. That shot, I was like, get out. Are they really going to do this?
Yeah. And I guess they did a lot of really cool stuff of like putting them into actual shots from The Shining.
Oh, really? Like actual shots?
That's what it seemed like, because some of it looked like real. Like they looked like they're obviously like CG avatars walking around, but it seemed like actual like real life renderings of The Shining, which I think maybe they took actual shots, or maybe they built sets and got some shots as well. But
who knows? But it looked great.
Yeah, it looked really cool. It was really good. Like they obviously like they took like the shot of like that woman walking out of the bathtub.
Yeah,
did some cool stuff with that.
Yeah,
and some of that was actually that was one of the things I felt like is a little creepier if you've actually seen The Shining. That like would that work for like a family audience? I guess I don't know. And I think it's maybe just what we associate The Shining with. Those of us.
Yeah, I think it would, because I think it would just cement The Shining as like a movie those kids cannot wait to see when they get older, you know? Like, yeah, that's what it would have done to me when I was a kid. Something like this in a movie, like every time there was like a big movie reference in another movie when I was a kid, I couldn't wait to see it, you know? Like I remember whenever I was like in 9th grade and I saw Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and they referenced The Crying Game. I was like, well, I got to see The Crying Game now, you know? Like, any kind of movie reference. So like I imagine a movie like this where they build it up to be like the scariest thing ever is just going to make a whole generation of little kids be like, oh man, what is this? You know?
Yeah. And you have one character who basically says like they were way too scared to watch it. So that adds to that too.
Well, it does the same thing to Chucky as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it does. I forgot that Chucky was in it for a second.
Yeah. It really makes 80s horror out to be the scariest stuff ever. Which
is good. I think that'll like excite people and get them to go see those older movies, which I think is actually kind of cool.
Yeah, certainly.
But yeah, The Shining was one of my favorite segments. If we can get to the end, I actually got to that's actually where I got a little bit more like emotionally invested in. Parzival gets like all 3 keys. He wins the prize. He does the Willy Wonka thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into a room where he meets the creator of the Oasis, and they have a little conversation. And at first I wasn't that into Mark Rylance's performance. Like I thought it was kind of like really weird and like drab and dry. But like in this scene, he really got to me. Like I actually got like teared up at one point.
You know, I've seen some other complaints about his performance. I actually think he's pretty good in this movie. I liked it.
I do in the end, I think. Like once it's all said and done, I think it was just kind of like off-putting at first because it's such a weird, like unique, specific choice of a way to play the character.
Yeah, it is. But you know, you believe it, I think, because you believe a guy like that would be weird. So I think it works, but it may be only just, you know.
Yeah. Like I think he's really like leaning into like this guy is like really socially awkward, which makes sense if you're gonna have a character who creates an entire virtual world where you can be somebody totally different.
Yeah, exactly.
I think he's just like leaning into that really hard, and it works. And in the end scene, during that, there's a boyhood version of himself playing video games the entire time that they're talking.
Yeah. He's like, I like to keep him around sometimes.
Yeah, I think there's something to that scene, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Like, I kind of want to watch it again and think more about, or at least like think more about that, or have a conversation about that. But like, did you make anything out of that whole part of that scene of like having the boyhood version of himself playing games, and then whenever he's done, he gets up and they both like walk out like through the door and like go away together?
If there's something there, I don't know that it's anything profound. If I'm going to try to assign a meaning to it, it could be, maybe sometimes you got to grow up, stop hanging out with the little kid version of you just because it's comfortable. Sometimes you got to grow. I mean, maybe that's what he's trying to say with the end of the movie, right? Like the end seemed kind of ham-fisted to me whenever,
totally.
Whenever he's like, and then, by the way, 2 days out of the week, we're shutting down the Oasis. And it's like, hang on, what?
Because we need social interaction in real life. And we need to be in the real world.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe if you are trying to be generous, you could read the ending as a really obvious of like everyone in this movie who is a big cultural nerd, like who is running the Oasis now, is essentially like Halliday. They're big nerds who never grew up in a state of arrested development, you know? Maybe what they're learning is that what Halliday learned in his regret in his old age, which is that social interaction with people is going to mean more to you than indulging the you that was like 7 years old, you know, and trying to keep that alive. Maybe not though. Maybe that's stretching it, but asked and I'm trying to come up with
yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't have anything either. And maybe thinking about it, like, I'm wondering about, I guess kind of an opposite direction is it keeping him around because that was a time when he was just playing games and they were simpler and not like the entire world, and maybe a sign of like him being a little bit aware of like the monster that he created and keeping around this time when gaming was simpler and gaming was more fun and not like everyone's existence.
Maybe. I don't know.
I think maybe I wasn't set up for that scene to happen, you know, because the rest of the movie I was kind of just letting my brain take those 2 hours off.
Yeah.
You know,
and in this particular IP, you may be overthinking it. It could literally just be like, he likes all the same stuff that I do, so I'm going to keep him around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or it could be like, I keep him around to remind me of something.
Yeah. There's also a lot about like regret.
Oh, a lot about regret. Yeah.
And so maybe it's just kind of like a sign of like before that happened and like the potential that had to not go make those same mistakes, you know?
Yeah. When it was okay to love video games as much as you do, and you didn't have to grow up in an undiluted version.
Yeah. Before like he had done any of those things that he may regret, you know, whether that's creating the Oasis or like splitting his partnership with Simon Pegg, you know?
Right.
I don't know. I may be reading too much into it, but like I said, like my brain was like shut off and just enjoying the ride for the most part. And so when that scene happened, I felt like, oh, I think there's more going on here. Like maybe it's not as complex if you think about it in hindsight, but like at the time it seemed very complex compared to like the rest of the movie.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
You mentioned this earlier that like they kind of ham-fist the ending of like, we're going to shut down the Oasis because you need real interaction with people in the real world, not just in this virtual world. And I agree that it was totally like tacked on, like ham-fisted, but do you feel like the movie missed an opportunity to like have more social commentary about the fact that everyone is stuck in this world and what it means? Do you think they just didn't develop it enough so that ending feels tacked on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like all kinds of stuff I have questions about, right? Like, and you've read the book, so maybe you know. So the Oasis is a lot like the internet, but almost exclusively for gaming is what it seems like based on the movie. And so if it's like the internet, there have got to be people who make a living in the Oasis, right? There have to be people like, he mentions that girl like puts up playthroughs videos and like does Twitch streaming, things like that. So I imagine there's an economy based around the Oasis, especially if the real world sucks as bad as it seems to suck in the movie, right? And so the idea is that everyone goes into the Oasis because it's awesome and you can do whatever you want. But if there's a whole economy based around this world, you can't just be like, and I'm shutting it down for 48 hours a week because people need to interact with other people, and I think that's good. And it's like, what? Hang on. Like, what about the people who live off what they do in this world? Or like, I don't know. I mean, does the book explore any of that?
It goes a little bit deeper into what's going on in the Oasis. So like, it isn't just for gaming. Like all of the kids attend school in the Oasis.
What? Okay, so
book,
so you can't shut that down for 2 days out of the week.
So if they had brought that up in the movie, that definitely wouldn't work. And maybe they would have done like, we'll shut it down on the weekends, and so there can still be
That's still
Monday
stupid.
through Friday. It is. I agree.
Like he should have just been like, and I learned that the real world's not so bad, and that I made a conscious choice to not be in the Oasis myself. That would have been just as clunky.
I think it would have been better.
But better, yeah.
Yeah. They don't actually get into what he does with the Oasis at all in the book. Like it ends right after he finds everything.
That's
That's kind of where the book ends. Or right after he wins and
that
he
makes
meets
me mad.
the girl or whatever.
To me, that's the biggest sin of the whole movie. Was like that last 2 minutes. I was like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, I think not touching on it works better in the book than touching on it the way that they do in the movie. But overall, I feel like there's so much like potential to like comment on like the amount of time people spend on social media and on Facebook and all that stuff, and to do it in a way where it seems like a virtual world, and do it, I guess, like a little more subtly than the way that they do it, and ask those questions. There's a lot of room to, to answer those questions that I think you want to know. Is like, are people making money off of this? Like, how does anything that happens like affect them, And right. I think there's just a lot more room to like ask those questions. And I feel like even though it is just a fun ride and you can just shut your brain off for the most part and enjoy it, I think I'm just disappointed a little bit at the lack of like use of it. That is one of the things that I hope for going from book to movie, is that like they may touch on some of that more and develop that more and make it a little bit more interesting of asking us like more moral questions about what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I wish they would have touched on that a little bit more, made it seem more like a theme that was going on throughout the movie. Like the idea that, because that would have gone a long way countering a lot of what people's problems are with Ready Player One in general, right? Which is, it seems like a lot of people hate this movie just on the general idea of it. It seems like they have made up their mind that it's like nothing but like canned nostalgia made to exist only to like scratch that itch. And I think if they would have touched on that in the script a little bit more, like, okay, it's not just about nostalgia, and the real world and human interaction is also important, then I think that would have helped a lot of people get on board with this movie to begin with. But it feels like it's something they tacked on at the end because they knew, they're like, this IP seems pretty soulless, so we need to throw some morals and some lessons in there. But we're not going to like spend the movie exploring those lessons or like leading to them in like a way that feels earned.
Yeah, exactly. That they're not developed enough to be satisfying. They just seem like an afterthought. I think we're kind of in agreement that like more of that throughout the movie, even though it was ham-fisted the way it was done, more of it throughout the movie would have been better. Like to develop it better would have, taken advantage of this concept and this story in a much better way.
Yeah, I agree. One thing before we wrap up, I did really enjoy the look of this movie. Like the dark colors. I thought the actual Oasis looked a lot better than I thought it would based on the trailers. And it blended with the real world footage a lot better than I thought it would.
Yeah. It didn't feel like two different movies.
Exactly, which is what I feared it would be. And usually I don't like worlds where like the entire thing's motion capture, like Avatar, Tintin, wasn't a fan of, I don't really like that too much generally. So I think the embracing the video gameness of it all, where like you can have a whole motion capture world, but lean into the fakeness of it all, like the fake lookingness of it all, helps.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Any final thoughts? Any different feelings about the movie after a conversation?
Not really. It's fine. Yeah. If you have kids or if you like good family movies, give it a shot. But if you're going to this expecting anything deeper than a good, solid family movie, you will be disappointed, I think.
And I think if someone wanted to watch it who hadn't seen it and I was around, I would have no problem watching it again. Like I don't know
I'd like
that
to
I'll
watch
go
it
out,
again.
I don't know that I'll go outside of my way to watch it on my own or by myself again to like try
Right.
to glean more out of it, but it's certainly watchable and I could easily watch it again without any boredom issues, I don't think.
Yeah, and the reason that would be is because I fear that the only thing you would glean from watching it again would just be catching references you didn't catch the first time, not necessarily plot that you're uncovering.
Or theme or
right, or anything
message.
deeper. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, Spielberg, he's a very he's just a good director. He was able to elevate this material to something that I didn't think it was capable of being, based on my preconceived notions. And even after seeing the movie, I'm convinced that like a lesser director would have made this a much lesser movie.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Even though there are things that I've obviously complained about that worked better in the book, or the things that weren't fully explored to their full potential, there's still things in this movie that were better than the book, right? Like it's just kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you for listening. Thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for creating our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
In a couple of days, we'll be releasing our next episode, which is a casually Criterion episode on Samuel Fuller's 1964 cult movie, The Naked Kiss. All right, so we will see you then.
Bye-bye.
See you later.